The FIA now finds itself in a position where a simple public statement is no longer sufficient. After Mercedes submitted more than 1,000 severe comments, including death threats and targeted abuse, directed at Kimi Antonelli, the federation has been urged to take concrete action. The surge in hostility came directly after accusations from Red Bull suggesting that Antonelli had deliberately allowed Lando Norris to pass, a claim that was later proven incorrect and withdrawn through an official apology. But by that point, the situation online had already escalated well beyond control. Antonelli's social media accounts were flooded, Mercedes received spillover harassment, and the impact on a 19-year-old rookie became a central concern for the FIA. The key question now is whether Red Bull's apology is enough. The FIA is reviewing additional material, including televised interviews and public remarks from the individuals involved. Several analysts argue that the governing body's swift intervention suggests it views the unfounded allegations as a direct trigger for the wave of abuse. If these comments are deemed to have breached the standards of conduct expected under the International Sporting Code, particularly regarding behaviour that endangers the well-being of anyone within the sport, then the consequences could extend well beyond a formal warning. With pressure mounting and the FIA assessing the full scope of the case, the issue is no longer about a single mistake on track. It is about responsibility, escalation, and whether the sport must set a precedent. Will this incident ultimately lead to one of the most significant sanctions Red Bull has faced in recent years? If you want to follow how this unfolds and what it means for the rest of the championship, consider subscribing so you don't miss the full breakdown. The controversy began with a single moment in the closing laps of the Qatar Grand Prix. Antonelli, running fourth and chasing Carlos Sainz for a potential podium, entered turn 9 with slightly more speed than the previous lap. He described the moment as one influenced heavily by dirty air and overheating tyres, conditions that pushed the car into oversteer. "I went in a bit quicker than the lap before," he explained, "and just lost the rear all of a sudden. With dirty air, the car is more unpredictable because you have less downforce and the tyres overheat more." He added that the following corner was compromised even further because he picked up dirt after running wide, leaving him with a massive moment again and no chance of defending when Norris came through. The replay and telemetry backed up his account. The loss of control was clear and there was no meaningful defensive option left once the car stepped out. Yet, in the immediate aftermath, Max Verstappen's race engineer, Gianpiero Lambiase, made a comment over team radio that was broadcast live. "Looks like he just pulled over and let Norris through." The remark, delivered without the benefit of replay or data, was enough to shape the initial narrative on social media. Red Bull's senior advisor Helmut Marko then went further in his own post-race comments, claiming it looked too obvious, and implying that Antonelli had waved Norris past. It was this escalation that triggered what Mercedes later described as an 1,100% increase in severe or suspicious comments on Antonelli's accounts, including death threats and homophobic slurs. Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff reacted sharply to the suggestion of intentional action. "This is total, utter nonsense," he said. "We're fighting for P2 in the championship, which is important for us. Kimi is fighting for a potential P3. How brainless can you be to even say something like this?" Wolff was clear that the situation had annoyed him not only because of its impact on Antonelli, but also because of how the race had unfolded for Mercedes. He felt the team had the pace for a strong result, and that the rookie's mistake, while costly, was simply that, a mistake. Wolff also confronted Lambiase after the race. According to Wolff, the Red Bull engineer admitted he had not seen the incident properly and apologised for the remark. Nonetheless, by the time clarifications emerged, the online reaction had taken on a life of its own. Antonelli blacked out his Instagram profile picture, a move that drew attention to the scale of the abuse, but also highlighted how young drivers can be overwhelmed by sudden waves of hostility. The FIA, through its United Against Online Abuse campaign, issued a statement condemning harassment in any form and emphasising the importance of a safe environment for everyone involved in the sport. It also confirmed that it stood in support of Antonelli. This set the stage for deeper involvement, particularly once Mercedes indicated it intended to submit evidence of the abuse directly to the governing body. Red Bull, recognising the severity of what had occurred, released an official apology. The statement acknowledged that the comments made before and immediately after the race were clearly incorrect, and that replay footage showed Antonelli losing control of the car. "We sincerely regret that this has led to Kimi receiving online abuse. the team wrote. Marko also issued an individual apology to German media, but the FIA's review suggests that the acknowledgement alone may not close the matter. The federation must decide whether the original comments constitute conduct that contributed to a hostile environment for a driver, especially one with limited experience in managing the pressures associated with front-running positions in Formula One. The stakes are amplified by the context of the championship fight. Norris's 2 additional points from passing Antonelli shifted the dynamic heading into Abu Dhabi. Instead of a 10-point cushion over Verstappen, Norris now holds a 12-point lead. That is the difference between needing to finish third to secure the title, regardless of Verstappen's result, and requiring more complex permutations. Red Bull therefore had reason to read the moment with heightened tension, even if their interpretation lacked factual grounding. In a season where McLaren's strategy error earlier in the race had already handed Verstappen an unexpected victory, the additional frustrations spilled into what many have called an overreaction. Antonelli's age and status as Lewis Hamilton's successor at Mercedes add another layer to the story. At 19, he is navigating a steep learning curve in his rookie year while dealing with expectations that exceed the usual demands placed on a new driver. He told reporters that the moment was frustrating because the podium was within reach and because he believed he could have comfortably kept Norris behind without the error. That belief is supported by the lap times preceding the incident. Norris had been struggling to close the gap in dirty air, and Antonelli's defensive lines were holding up. The mistake was decisive not because of intent, but because of how critical positions and points have become in the final races of the season. The broader question for the FIA is how it handles responsibility within the sports communication ecosystem. Drivers, engineers, and team officials are all public-facing figures, and their words carry weight. When those words are misinterpreted or delivered without caution, the consequences can affect not only reputations, but also the personal safety of those targeted. The governing body has emphasized in recent years that online abuse is unacceptable, but this incident may force a more formalized approach. If comments from high-level personnel are judged to have contributed to the abuse, the FIA could use this case to set an example that discourages careless speculation in the future. That potential shift is partly why the possibility of sanctions has become a serious talking point. Administrative penalties, fines, or official reprimands are within the range of responses the FIA can issue. While nothing has been confirmed, the fact that the federation is conducting a detailed review signals that it considers the matter significant. Some observers argue that a mild penalty would fail to address the underlying issue, while others believe a stronger response could recalibrate expectations around public commentary in Formula One. Meanwhile, the paddock atmosphere has grown tense. Red Bull faces pressure to explain how 2 of its most influential figures escalated a misunderstanding into a widely amplified allegation. Mercedes has positioned itself as both a defender of its young driver and a team seeking accountability for what it sees as reckless comments. Norris and McLaren have largely stayed out of the public dispute, though Andrea Stella noted that both McLaren drivers were impacted by the team's earlier strategic error. Norris himself has avoided attributing his late race gain to anything other than Antonelli's mistake, focusing instead on the championship implications. As the season moves towards its finale in Abu Dhabi, the incident has become about more than 2 lost points. It is a test of how Formula One handles responsibility, communication, and the protection of its participants in an era of instantaneous and often aggressive online reaction. All eyes now turn to the FIA's next steps. With the governing body reviewing evidence, consulting regulations and assessing the harm caused, the decision will carry weight not only for Red Bull, but for the sport as a whole. The question is no longer whether a mistake occurred on track. It is whether the off-track consequences of that mistake demand a new standard of accountability. And so the final question remains: will the FIA's ruling transform this controversy into a landmark case that forces teams to rethink how they communicate under pressure? Or will it become yet another flashpoint that fades without meaningful change?